Good afternoon, Luang Por.
Good afternoon, Ajahn Asuko.
Thank you for taking time to do a Q&A. It's very generous of you. Today is Sunday, the 8th of December. And I was wondering if you could share some of your reflections and your experience around dealing with fear as an emotion in the heart.
Well, fear is a survival mechanism. You know, we live in a universe that there's a lot to be frightened of. So we take it very personally, like the ideal is to be fearless. But when the conditions arise, when frightening conditions arise, then whether it's internal or external, we feel this emotion. Then we identify with I'm frightened, my fear problem, and that's the illusion we create that we're frightened actually, rather than there's just fear because of the conditions that have arisen. When the conditions, the dangerous, threatening conditions disappear, then the fear goes. But we can also be just plain neurotic, create all kinds of imaginary things to frighten us. Because we have an imagination, we can believe there's spirits in the room or ghosts and black widow spiders and anything you want, you know, a frightening, threatening creature or image we can create with the mind. So we think there's spies under the bed or in the clothes cupboard or in the wardrobe, but we can imagine anything and we become frightened. And to deal with it is of course through awareness, being aware that when the natural conditions, when like you're in the forest and a bear appears and the conditions arise and you don't have time to think, I'm afraid, you naturally try to seek shelter or run away from the bear. But when we're at home, imagining spirits in the room or spies under the bed or ghosts, the house is haunted, or then we create the fearful images that when the conditions may not be there at all. So just to be aware of that the very thoughts that I'm frightened, to be aware of that is to begin to use fear as a practice, to see it as, when I think frightening thoughts, then, and I attach to these thoughts and believe they're mine, then I become a frightened person. And so it's through this investigation, is not to get rid of fear, but to understand that fear is part of this form, this life that we experience through the senses, and how we can imagine frightful images that don't exist at all. So this imagination can be a regular tyrant of neurotic fears that we want to get rid of, and begin to notice that wanting to get rid of fear is a problem. Because none of us want to be frightened. We'd like to get rid of it. So this form of desire to get rid of something we don't like or don't want, is a condition we create in our mind. We imagine ourselves as a frightened person, and that's an image that we can grasp and believe in. Go to psychiatrists, take drugs and everything to get rid of it, rather than understanding that the ghosts of the mind, the fears that we imagine or create in our mind, are conditions that arise and cease and are not personal. They are what they are, but the ability to imagine that human beings have is to imagine angels or devils. I mean, you're not going to just imagine angels and everything's beautiful and wonderful and life is golden happiness. You can imagine that. But when you look at life as a human being, there's a lot of what we don't want about it, like old age, sickness, death. You know, we would like to be young and healthy as our personality is formed when we're young, because these are desirable things that we want. But when you're young, when you're a young person, you don't imagine yourself ever being old. At least my experience, I never imagined myself as an old man. You know, I can imagine myself as a young man and healthy and strong, and you know, had these images of male beauty and that the advertising companies play on, and I could imagine I used to be a bodybuilder and to improve my appearance and that, because I imagine myself wanting to keep looking good and appealing and young and handsome, and then I don't think I ever imagined myself being old. And now that I am old, I don't ever imagine myself being young. But being old is kind of, it has its benefits. The fact that you just don't create those images, that you're not intimidated by these vain advertisements and play on youth and good health as something you've got to get back. But as you grow in wisdom into old age, then you more or less accept the inevitability of an aging body is like this.
In dealing with fear, quite often it comes as a paralyzing emotion, and the object of fear, whether it's something outside of us in the world around us or something in our minds, can have a bit of hypnotic effect on us. How would you recommend dealing with that in terms of relationship to the object of fear and then to fear itself and awareness, how to guide that process of witnessing fear and understanding it?
Well, it's learning to see it as just an impermanent condition, rather than as a personal problem. Even the fear of a bear or lion chasing you is we don't, if there's a lion chasing you, you don't imagine it, you don't have time to think about, I'm frightened, you just are naturally frightened. Because the conditions for survival, the survival mechanism, they're part of the mammalian condition. All animals have to be careful because the danger that the other animals have towards animals is evident. And whether mice take it personally or it's instinctual. I mean, you know, when a cat's around, the mice are not playing. Because instinctually they aren't thinking, I shouldn't be afraid of cats, or I've got to conquer my fear of cats. It's just the conditions are very evident and instinctual. But language itself complicates our lives. Because mice don't have a language that they can probably have instinctual warning signs, but they've not developed languages or imagination. And you know, a neurotic mouse in a gilded cage afraid of cats. I think that's more like a Disney cartoon than a reality. But in my early years as a monk, I lived in a branch monastery where it was in a kind of very rural part of northeast Thailand, and at first there was no proper kuti, except the villagers built a kind of platform in the jungle, and it was well off the ground, but there was no roof or no protective shelter. And then they told me there was a python under a cave nearby. And then sitting in the dark at night in the jungle, you know, then you hear sounds and jungle sounds, animals or whatever, and you can imagine them, so you feel free of fear. And I would really experiment with that. I'd imagine this python coming to swallow me. And there was this owl that kept sitting in a tree right above me and looking at me, staring at me, and it had bright eyes. And so I could create, imagination about this owl. But I started deliberately imagining the most frightening images in the dark. You're sitting in a dark night, no moon, no light whatsoever, on an open platform in a jungle. And then you imagine, there could be anything out there, you don't know. So I sat for an hour or so in the dark out in the open and imagine all kinds of monsters, snakes, creepy crawly things that want to bite or kill me. And I really, really deliberately imagined the most terrifying, horrifying images. And after a while I just started laughing because I realized I was just playing with my mind. And then I had an umbrella that monks make. We make these umbrellas out of bamboo. And we have a mosquito net that we hang around them. So I had this umbrella and mosquito net on this platform. And so I'd go inside the mosquito net under the umbrella and I'd light a candle. And I felt completely safe because the candlelight lit up the interior of the umbrella with the mosquito net, and I could see everything, all around me. There were no snakes, no frightening insects. And then, what kind of protection would a mosquito net have against a python or a tiger or something like that? Learning to, it's rather than trying to get rid of fear, I really tried to use fear just to see how frightened I could be just by imagining the most horrible things. And because I was intentionally doing it, I couldn't take it all that seriously. Because basically I'm not a frightened person. I've never been afraid of ghosts or spies under the bed or anything like that. So. But I know some people are basically very frightened people. Fear is a part of their life, and so that they just want to get rid of it. And that's where it's important to see the desire to get rid of fear is the real problem. Sometimes the fear is justified. It's a survival mechanism in our species. And somebody that doesn't have any fear then might not survive for very long. But in Thailand, the culture, they very much believe in ghosts. And ghosts are frightening. And my family, my mother and father, told me that ghosts didn't exist, that it was superstition. So I never believed in ghosts. And I remember as a boy, there was a haunted house not far from where we lived. It was a vacant house, an old house that was dilapidated, and all the children in the neighborhood said there were ghosts or it had evil forces in it. And so one day, my friends and I decided to go into this haunted house, and I was the first one to go. There was nothing in the house.
How does that? How does the practicing with fear relate to the fear that people experience sometimes in practice? Some people are afraid of meditating. Others meditate, and when the mind gets still, they're afraid of the stillness. Or they might be afraid of something that arises in the practice.
Yeah, well, that's why, because you can, I remember having frightening hallucinations in meditation. But I really trusted in the Buddha's wise teaching that all conditions are impermanent. Because I found the Buddha's wisdom very supportive. I was a samanera and I didn't have a teacher at the time. I wasn't with and met Ajahn, and I was there sitting for hours in my kuti and just observing my states of mind. And pretty soon I started having hallucinations. And I saw my mother and my sister walk out of my head. I visually saw this. And I thought, I'm going bonkers, I'm going crazy. And then the Buddhist teaching that anything that arises ceases. He was right. My mother and sister coming out of the top of my head were not harming me in any way. They went away. And after that, I never had any hallucinations. But in meditation, silent meditation, when you lose control, when you give up and let go, and you lose the habitual neurotic control of your mind, then the dark side, the shadow side can manifest. And this, we're frightened of that. Like there's something lurking deep down inside me, some kind of frightening thing that I don't want to know about, or people are afraid to go to psychotherapy or psychiatry because they don't want to explore anything other than just live on the surface, where they can control everything and feel safe. But in meditation, you're giving up your control of your mind. You're just watching it, because it is that mental states just come and go, and you don't. And suppressed fears and anger and resentment, if you let go, then they can manifest. But in letting them manifest, then they can go away. When you keep trying to control them and get rid of them through resistance and denial, then they're like held, imprisoned in your body. They're locked in. Every time they start rising to the surface, you become panic-stricken and frightened and close the prison door on them, slams the door on them. They're in there trying to get out, and you keep refusing to let them go. Where in proper meditation, good meditation, you're letting the prisoners out of the cell. And when they go away. They don't come back. And that's where this whole Buddhist practice of letting go, seeing the emptiness of phenomena. These are wisdom reflections, they're not doctrines. Because it doesn't take very long before you realize all conditions are impermanent. It's a teaching that we never get in our education or cultural background. And that's where Buddhism is, a wisdom teaching, because it's telling us the truth about life rather than trying to mask it or cover it up or make it better or worse than it is. And silence we like the idea of silence, but the reality of it can be frightening or boring. So like peace, my many reflections on peace, being involved in peace marches in the early 60s and things like that, that peace is a nice idea. We should be peaceful. We should get along. I want peace. And parading in front of the Atomic Energy Commission in Berkeley, with a peace sign. I wanted the American government to make me peaceful. But, so I thought peace was, the conflict and war was the problem, that the political systems were imposing on us. So you blame the left or the right or the communists or whoever, the Ku Klux Klan, and because they tend to not represent or be a peaceful force in the society. But on these marches, one time I had insight that I didn't know what I was talking about. Peace was a nice ideal. That all these, there were many peace organizations in Berkeley at the time, and so it was, very idealistic thought how to be peaceful. But then, upon reflecting on life, peace isn't necessarily the nature of conditioned phenomena. That wars have been going on ever since one tribe fought another tribe, or nature itself is not peaceful. It's, the strong over the weak, the cats killing the birds, and the big fish eating the little fish, whales swallowing a whole school of precious little fish. And it's not fair or right according to an idea, but it's about survival, and nature itself is not, by its very nature, is not a peaceful condition. Nature as we see it through what we can visually see and hear. But when we do, through meditation, we can realize ultimate peace. And some people, when they first realize ultimate peace, it scares them. Because it's they don't know what it is. They know the idea of peace. They have not any wars or conflicts. They have a relationship that is always peaceful and harmonious, are ideals, but that's not life, how life functions. And but ultimate peace is here and now. It's not something you don't have, it's something you never recognize. And through this practice of witnessing the arising, ceasing of phenomena, if you learn to just be the watcher, the witness, the observer to your mental states, thoughts, emotions, memories, and realize you're not the physical body that you identify with. What's left when you've let go of absolutely everything is blissful peace. And blissful peace is always about here and now. It's ultimate reality. It's not created. It doesn't arise and cease. It's always present and here and now, so you don't have to get it, but just let go of the ignorant clinging to unpeaceful conditions, fear and desire and anger, and that are create endless problems with politically or with relationships, with family life, with Sangha life. So peace is our true nature. It's Dhamma. When you realize, when you let everything go, you're relaxed. Because the very act of clinging takes effort. So much of our life we're holding on to things, without really being aware of it, because it's our habit pattern, the way we've been developed as a human form, how we've been conditioned. And the society that we live in conditions us to fear, to have prejudice, biases of all sorts. Or religion can do it. Religion can be a force of grasping and bias, the division, where ultimate peace, Dhamma, isn't conditioned. And when you grasp conditions, you don't notice your true nature. You've forgotten it. You're caught in the realm of samsara, or the eternal cycles of birth and death. And of course that means you're caught in a cycle, a habit pattern that can follow you through to the end of your life. So this interest in meditation at this time is a very good thing, because it offers a way of dealing with fear and desire and remorse and guilt and anger and prejudice and bias, whatever form they take. You begin to see that it's not about there's absolutely right or wrong sides. I notice in myself just my views, my prejudiced views tend to be very liberal. So when I hear the more conservative views, like of evangelical Christians, I say they're wrong. But ultimately, there's no right or wrong. It's just ignorance conditions suffering. Ignorance of your true nature, Dhamma, or peace, or bliss, or God, whatever you want to call it. It's not, there's different words, but it doesn't have a word. It's not even Dhamma, it's like this. And you don't create, you just rest in it. And it's not about believing in Buddhism, because just attaching to Buddhism is still a problem. Maybe it's a good attachment. I respect the scholastic side of Buddhism a lot. It's very good. But the grasping of words of Buddhist scriptural injunctions and rules of conduct and moral imperatives and all that grasping of what is right and good is still a form of suffering. So good is good, but it is impermanent. Is Nibbana, is Dhamma good? And of course, we say, yeah, this is the ultimate good or ultimate, that's the best you can do with words to describe which has no language. Like Dhamma didn't create any languages. It doesn't have a language, where human beings, we've created language. It's a creation. So the arguments, intellectual arguments, are all about I'm right, you're wrong, you've got it all wrong, or I've got it right. And so right and wrong, and some on the right they're good, and on left, they're bad, or whatever position you take, is a form of conditioning, cultural, tribal conditioning. And I've noticed now, there's a lot of condemnation of colonialism, of slavery, and it's wrong and bad, and the United States should apologize for its years of slavery, and the British should apologize for the wrongs they've done in their colonial system, and it gets very righteous. So we can take sides and feel guilty about being American because it was founded as a slave nation. And you can make a case for that and feel guilty and ashamed of being white. But what are you doing? Is that you're creating these images. It's wrong, slavery's wrong, it's evil, it's bad, it's immoral. These are ways of condemning something of the past and feeling guilty about it. Where now there is, America freed the slaves. So that was good. To keep the slaves wouldn't be good, according to right and wrong, good or bad. But in Dhamma, when you realize Dhamma, there's no good or bad, right or wrong, virtue or vice. It's pure perfection, present here and now, that we all are. It's our true nature. It's not something we've been conditioned to believe in, but something we awaken to recognize through meditation, through silent meditation. So then the problems of the world seem endless. Like every morning, I like to listen to the world service. And every morning, it's about wars and what's wrong with the world and what's, political sides, who's right and wrong. And so I listen to this, and watch how it affects me. It's like the listening to a radio or watching television, because when has the World Service ever been able to say it's peaceful everywhere and everybody's happy and everything is good? That's never happened, because it doesn't happen. On the worldly side, there's always conflict. We can romanticize about tribal when we were just primitive tribal humans surviving, and the next tribe only a mile away are our enemy. You got what we call the tribal mentality, where got to protect my tribe against the one in the next area that isn't mine. I mean, it's a way of survival and of protecting yourself and your family or your tribe or your group, because you see everything in these divisive terms of me and mine and not me and mine, and the friend and allies and the enemies, we divide everything into right and wrong, or friend or enemy. And that is what the mind does. That's what language does. Language is very divisive. And we're educated with words. You know, none of us were educated with silence or Dhamma teaching, but in more or less tribal affiliations or national affiliations. And that conditions us, and we acquire those biases and prejudices, and we're quite innocent. But we have nothing to compare it with other than what mother and father tell us, or our group, our tribe tell us. We believe that because we have no way of questioning that till we get older. In our teenage, we start questioning. But your conditioning for life, for your whole life, takes place during the early years. Who you are, your worth, who's right, what's wrong, morality, all of these are conditions that we have. Immorality. Now, in this present time, in modern countries like this, a lot were things that were immoral 60 years ago are no longer. So, what is morality? You know, this is creation through words, through concepts of right and wrong. So then consciousness, Dhamma, consciousness that was never born, never ends. Dhamma, ultimate truth, absolute reality, God, Allah, Brahma. These are all words for what has no word, is wordless. And if we grasping language, reason, and logic, then we can make a good point about being reasonable, logical, sensible, and realistic and right, according to reason and logic. But so much of our conditioning is not reasonable or logical. It's part of just what we get from our parents or our tribe or our religion when we're young, when we're innocent. Where when you realize Dhamma for yourself, and this is emphasized in the reflections of when we reflect on Dhamma, it's to be realized individually. The Buddha couldn't enlighten his disciples. They had to realize it themselves. At Bajatang in Pali, where Luang Por Sumedho was always saying the word Ben Bajatang, to be realized for yourself. Because as wise as Luang Por Sumedho was, he couldn't enlighten any of us. We were quite devoted to him as a teacher. But he kept he was a good guide, pointing the way not to himself or to belief systems, but to our own, making us to encouraging us to wake up and investigate life. Because the Buddhist teachings are about investigating, understanding for yourself your true nature. So what more can you ask of life? Become king of the world or queen of the pageant or a Lamborghini? I mean, some people's goals in life are very frivolous.
Thank you for these reflections, Paul.